Undercover boss buys a pastry, freezes when bakery worker says she hasn't eaten in 2 days. Fairness should not live on a strategy slide. It must exist at every pastry counter in the most ordinary of morning shifts. Graham Easton, 50 years old, isn't a stranger to flour and ovens. Before Hope Horizon became a bakery chain present in dozens of cities, he once stood behind a tiny street stall, kneading dough with his own hands, brewing coffee himself, and mopping the floors after every customer had left. He used to believe, if a loaf of bread could bring hope, then the place that sells it must be one that respects human dignity most. But over time, reports, meetings, and boardroom strategy slowly pulled him away from that belief. One early winter morning, foggy and cold, Graham put on a faded gray jacket, pulled a low baseball cap over half his face, and carried an old notebook. He stepped into a suburban branch, a location marked stable on paper. But he knew well, numbers never tell the whole story. The shop still had few customers. Warm yellow light draped over the scent of freshly baked bread and the gentle hum of the coffee machine. No one noticed the quiet man choosing a seat near the window. Graham ordered a simple breakfast: a cup of black coffee, a slice of toast, 2 sunny-side-up eggs, not because it was his favorite, but because those are quick orders likely to prompt a relieved sigh from the server, and they gave him a chance to observe how the morning shift truly operated. He didn't bring a secretary, no assistant, no cameras, just the quiet of his own presence and a question yet unanswered. Is Hope Horizon still a place where an ordinary worker can be seen, acknowledged, and treated the way they deserve? And he wouldn't leave until he found the answer for himself. A small answer, but one that might make an entire system rethink itself. Lana, the young waitress, slight in build, face always carrying a polite smile despite the sleep-deprived eyes, brought Graham's breakfast to his table. She didn't know who the man sitting before her was, only that he looked courteous, spoke softly, and said thank you when served. After a few minutes, when she returned to refill the coffee, Graham asked with a bit of light humor, "Morning shift like yours must rack up a lot of tips, huh?" Lana froze. A flicker of embarrassment passed through her eyes. She didn't smile. She didn't answer right away. Then her voice came very soft, as if even she wasn't sure she should be saying it out loud. "Actually, I haven't eaten since the day before yesterday. I've been saving money. Every morning I just drink water." Graham froze. At that moment, he didn't say anything more. But inside was a silent shockwave. That wasn't just a reply. It was an exposed crack. A system he had built where he once set the principle that everyone must be seen and be allowed to live with dignity for their effort, had now allowed a young woman to work a full morning shift on an empty stomach for 2 days. He watched Lana walk away, continuing her duties at a steady pace, as if what she just said was nothing unusual. But to Graham, it wasn't ordinary. It was an alarm bell. If someone serving under the banner of his own brand had to go hungry just to survive, then perhaps something had crept into his system that was fundamentally wrong, right between the lines of the principles he believed were unshakable. And that was the moment Graham decided he would not leave until he knew exactly why and who had caused a worker doing enough to still suffer hunger. Some wounds don't bleed. They just quietly live inside a name that's been replaced. Graham stayed, not because the breakfast was good, but because something inside him was swelling a mixture of suspicion, anger, and a sorrow he couldn't quite define. He ordered another coffee, set the cup aside, and watched Lana. She worked like a clock that never stopped ticking, always the first to greet customers with "good morning," personally wiped down each table, replaced napkins if there were smudges, always bowed slightly when placing dishes, her eyes never hurried even once. Graham paid closer attention. Every time a customer paid by card and chose to leave a tip, the POS screen behind the counter displayed the same familiar line: 0912, Table 3, 3, tip, Kyle M. Table 6, the 4 pives, tip Kyle M. 10, Table 2475, tip, Kyle M. The name Kyle Graham realized belonged to a tall male employee in a crisp shirt, wearing a headset, standing behind the counter all morning. He hadn't left his post, didn't serve tables, didn't touch a single plate of pastries, but every tip bore his name. Near noon, Lana slipped into the break room for a quick water refill. Graham also stood up, pretending to stroll around, then quietly approached her. "You remember all the tables you served this morning?" he asked gently, like a curious regular. Lana gave a slight nod. Then she pulled out a small notebook from her apron pocket, its paper yellowed, edges slightly worn, with a transparent plastic cover. Inside, every line of handwriting was neat and precise, as if any single smudge might disqualify her from being seen as someone worth remembering. 7:45, Table 1, $2.5. 8:22, Table 5, $3.25. 9:10, Table 4, $4. System record, Kyle M. The last page in red ink, underlined, total, 423.753 weeks. Lana didn't look at him as she said, I don't have an ID to log into the POS, so I don't show up, but I write it down just to make sure I existed. Then Graham held the notebook, his eyes lingering on the total. But what weighed on him wasn't the number. It was the fact that a person had to manually record their own existence because a system that was supposed to protect her had silently erased her name. Graham used to believe fairness was something that could be programmed, but today he understood. When a system lets someone who stands idle collect the rewards, while the one who works hard goes hungry, then the problem doesn't lie in the software. It lies in the very silence that the system has chosen to allow. Silence isn't just the absence of words. It's when justice has no one left to say its name. Returning to the table, Graham sat motionless for several minutes. His hand rested on the notebook Lana had just given him, while his mind was clouded, like a bakery oven choked with fog before the fire is lit. At Hope Horizon, back when he was still kneading dough by hand, Graham had once written a line and hung it by the entrance to the main kitchen. We don't just bake bread, we nourish trust. Now, he was starting to wonder, where had that trust gone? Graham decided to run a live test. When a regular customer stood up after breakfast and left a tip via card, he saw Lana bow slightly in gratitude, out of polite habit. But less than 10 seconds later, a beep came from the POS system. Kyle was confirming the transaction. A receipt was printed, the name in bold at the bottom, Kyle M. Why him? Graham walked toward the counter, pretending to inquire about a pastry. He slowly observed Kyle's every movement, no eye contact with customers, fingers tapping like a robot, never once interacting with the waitstaff. Kyle, are you always on the morning shift? Graham asked casually, like a curious guest. Always. I'm in charge of POS and transaction confirmation. Everything's managed from here. And the servers? They just bring out the food. Tips still go into the system like normal. Graham gave a slight nod and returned to his table. But every answer echoed like a steady knock on cold brick walls, hollow and numb. Then came the final detail that revealed the quiet collusion. Another young staff member, named Ellie, noticed how intently Graham was inspecting the receipts. She hesitated, then stepped closer and lowered her voice. I don't know who to tell, but this has been going on for months. Only people with an ID get tips. We work all day, but on paper, we don't exist. Graham looked at her. In Ellie's eyes was fear, but also a flicker of hope, as if someone had finally stopped to truly listen. Inner turmoil hit rock bottom. That night, Graham couldn't sleep. He sat in a small upstairs office at headquarters, going through every old policy, every line of the POS operating system he had once signed off on. The words once considered standardized now felt cold and detached. Only managers or assigned employees with fixed access IDs may process tip transactions. Not a single line was technically wrong, but everything was misaligned. A system once proud of its efficiency had become a trap for those not given a name, and Graham knew just one more step, and the truth would no longer be buried beneath the powdered sugar of so-called stability. A just system is one that knows how to call the right people by name. Abi Sex. 1 week later, 8:59 a.m. No gray coat, no hat hiding his face. Graham Easton, in a sharp navy blue suit with a crisp white pocket square, stepped into the Hope Horizon branch on the city outskirts. But this time, no one glanced past him as if he were just another customer. The entire atmosphere paused the moment his gaze passed from one employee to the next. No introductions, no name tag. He walked straight to the counter, reached into his inner jacket pocket, and plugged a USB into the port behind the POS system. The screen instantly changed. Internal video playback began. Lana, in her worn-out uniform, brought a tray to table 6. She bowed slightly and placed the food down with both hands. The customer smiled, tapped their card, and left. Seconds later, Kyle stepped up to the POS, typed in a few commands. The line appeared, 0914, table 6, 50 tip, Kyle M. Next scene audio from the break room, the manager's voice cold, clear. Only those with approved IDs receive tips. If you don't have one, don't expect anything. Don't let the system get messed up by a few unofficial names. The whole room seemed frozen. Kyle tightened his grip on the scanner in his hand. Lana stood behind the counter, her face pale, but she didn't avert her gaze. Graham took a step forward, His voice wasn't loud, but it was clear and resolute. She worked. You stood. She welcomed guests. You typed on a keyboard. And the system I built, meant to honor the honest, was abused to turn her invisible. He nodded. Two staff members from headquarters stepped forward. Kyle M. terminated immediately. Shift manager suspended pending full investigation into all shifts and transactions over the past 3 months. Then Graham walked back to the POS machine and plugged in a small device. The screen immediately lit up with the following message. Tip system live. Real name vertical bar, real time vertical bar, public view. He turned around, facing all the employees and several customers who had stopped eating to watch. From today on, every tip will be recorded under the true name of the person who served. No more handwritten notes just to prove existence. No more hardworking staff having their names replaced just because they didn't have system access. No Hope Horizon system will ever again allow those doing right to go hungry. The toaster dinged by coincidence. Warmth from the oven for the first time in weeks no longer carried a sense of quiet injustice, but instead, the scent of renewal. The scent of a system being called by its rightful name. The truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs someone brave enough to turn the sound of justice back on. The cafe remained silent, but it was no longer the silence of resignation. It was a moment when everyone felt that something real was changing. A kitchen worker stepped out, still wearing gloves, eyes moving from Lana to Graham, as if silently asking, "Is this really happening?" A young trainee whispered, "So, we don't have to write things down anymore?" Graham nodded slowly. No one should have to remember their own name, just to remind a system that they exist. Lana was still standing there, her eyes red, but her posture straighter than ever before. Graham turned to the IT technician and handed over a printed list. This is the supplemental list. The names of those who served but were never recognized by the system. Each of them will be reimbursed the missing tips calculated from the first day recorded in Lana's notebook. A soft "oh" echoed from the back. No one spoke loudly, but everyone felt something had just been set right, not just through software, but through restored trust. He pulled an envelope from his briefcase. "And this is my formal apology to the entire morning shift, not because you did anything wrong, but because I allowed the system I built to forget how to truly see people." He placed the envelope on the counter, right next to the POS machine, beneath the glowing words, "Tip system live." Outside the window, the sun was now shining clearly, but no one rushed to leave. Graham turned to go, but as he passed Lana, he paused gently and said just loud enough for her to hear, "Thank you for not staying silent, even though you never raised your voice." Lana pressed her lips together, nodded slightly. She didn't speak, but her hand for the first time rested firmly on the counter, as if, for the first time in many weeks, she truly believed she had been seen. And right there in the morning light and the scent of fresh pastries, Hope Horizon wasn't just baking bread anymore. It was rebuilding trust, with fairness, with real names, and with a boldness that no longer needed to hide. Justice should not come after. It must be present from the beginning, like yeast in every loaf kneaded the right way. 1 month later, the suburban branch of Hope Horizon didn't look much different. The counter still dusted in flour, the scent of cinnamon and butter still drifting in the early breeze. But inside, something had changed forever. Right behind the register, the new POS system was running smoothly. Every receipt clearly displayed the name of the actual server. All tip amounts were updated in real time. No edits, no reassignment, no more default IDs. No one had to handwrite logs just to prove they had been present. Lana no longer stood behind the counter. She sat in the internal training room in front of her, a group of new employees. On the table lay a notebook wrapped in leather, with a small label on the corner, "Living document, the right things once forgotten." Lana didn't teach from a textbook. She recounted in a calm, honest voice the mornings she spent silently recording tips, and the feeling of being erased within the very system she devoted herself to each day. The last page of the notebook still bore a red ink line. Total, 423.753 weeks. System recognition, Kyle M. This isn't just a number. It's how a system can quietly extinguish trust if no one steps up to fix it. Another morning, Graham Easton returned. No meetings, no inspections. He simply sat quietly at the same window-side table where he had first watched Lana serve in silence. On the plate, a simple slice of pound cake. Beneath it, a neatly folded $20 bill and a handwritten note. "Thank you for holding on to what's right, even when it meant going hungry." Lana found the note after that day's training shift. She folded it gently and placed it between the pages of the notebook, right at the page with the total lost tips. Not to hold a grudge, not to recall sorrow, but to remind herself that justice must sometimes be held by those who were once silenced, but never truly silent. Not everyone needs praise, but everyone deserves to be seen. A few weeks later, an internal workshop was held at Hope Horizons headquarters, themed Invisible Value, How a Worker Feels Their Own Presence. There was no flashy backdrop, no ornate stage. Lana was invited to open the session. She didn't wear a blazer. She didn't bring printed slides. She only brought her old notebook now, a symbol known by everyone in the system. She didn't need to introduce herself. Most attendees had already read the report about the Outskirts branch and the story titled $423.75, 3 weeks and a missing name. She stepped up calmly and said, "I'm not here to retell a sad story. I'm here to remind everyone of one thing. If no one speaks up, fairness becomes something that only exists in handbooks." The room fell silent. Then a hand went up. It was Chloe, a new employee from the Northern Branch. "How did you stay kind, knowing you were being forgotten?" Lana looked straight at her. A brief pause, then a soft smile. "Because I knew, if I disappeared too, then who would be next to be erased?" A few days later, on the company-wide internal bulletin board, Graham Easton posted a short note, no stamp, no corporate logo. Lana was once forgotten by the system, but thanks to her, that system remembered why it was created in the first place. At the bottom, just a single delicate signature, Graham, and underneath, a quote printed in bold italics, "You cannot build a decent bakery if the baker goes to bed hungry." A fair system doesn't begin with software. It begins when someone dares to face the truth and chooses not to look away. Because if fairness only arrives after someone has been hurt, then that is not fairness. It is a delayed correction. Fairness should be something sprinkled evenly, like powdered sugar on every freshly baked loaf, so that everyone, no matter who they are, where they work, or which shift they're on, knows this: they have been seen, and they have not been forgotten.